Hello and welcome to Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things relating to your well-being, including interviews with experts in the fields of nutrition, physical and mental health, and my 5-minute food facts series. I'm Amanda Hayes, your host, a nutritionist with a passion for well-being. Before I introduce today's guest, I will take a moment to let you know that you can subscribe to my podcast on YouTube. Hit the red subscribe button or on your favourite podcast app, including iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify or Google Podcasts. I will also mention that although I will often be speaking with experts, any information or advice provided in Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast is not intended to be used to treat, cure or prevent injuries or medical conditions, and is not a substitute for advice from your own health professionals. Today I am here with Tina Jameson. Tina is a librarian who has developed a very keen interest in bushwalking and hiking. What makes Tina special is that she recognised an opportunity to make bushwalking about more than personal enjoyment and fitness. She acquired the necessary skills through Bushwalking Leadership South Australia to lead groups on bushwalking and camping expeditions, even in remote areas, and came up with a plan to implement a program called Strong Daughters, where she takes mothers and daughters away on hiking and camping adventures. These are designed to challenge personal boundaries and develop their bonds. Tina has seen some excellent results, so for all of you hardworking mothers and fathers out there, sit down with a warm cup of tea or coffee and hear about Tina's adventures in the bush. Hello Tina, and welcome to Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast.
Hello Amanda.
So today I'd like to talk about the Strong Daughters program and particularly the benefits you've seen for participants. But before we launch into that, can you please tell us about your path to becoming a qualified bushwalking leader? For example, where did your interest in bushwalking come from?
Well, I guess at this moment it's probably a good opportunity for me to point out to any listeners that I am not a young outdoor Eddie that looks like the Instagram model you find on the top of a mountain. I very much grew up in a rural part of England a long time. I've been in Australia about over 20 years now. So I just turned 50 this year, so definitely not the young model. And I grew up running, riding, walking at the foot of the Cleveland Hills, so I grew up in the countryside, so that to me was very normal.
Right.
In terms of what people think of as bushwalking, that part of my adventure is really relatively young. I think I've always loved hiking and walking, but in terms of serious bushwalking, probably the last 5 or 6 years. And that journey really started at a time in my life where I was looking for a new sense of identity. I think we spend a lot of our younger years having adventures, exploring, running, and at some point life, family, children, work just takes over. It gets in the way.
It buries you.
It does bury you, and you forget. You forget what it was like to actually do those things. So I'd hit that, I call it my midlife adventure stage, where I was really looking to shake things up a bit. Real cliche, read Cheryl Strayed's Wild, and kind of sat at the end of that book and went, I need to do something. So I went for my own crazy, very ill-prepared, not as long as hers, journey in Deep Creek Conservation Park. That's part of my backyard, and at the time I didn't know very well at all. I was just looking to do something. Did all the wrong things, went very ill prepared, 2 days overnight, loved it. Didn't take enough water, didn't realise there was a bushwalking season, so walked at the wrong time of the year, and I remember every little bit of that walk extremely vividly. It meant an awful lot to me. But I also recognised that I was very ill prepared and that if I wanted to do more of this, I needed to learn some skills.
Right.
I needed to actually find some way of knowing what I was doing and finding some like-minded people if I could.
And being safe.
Being safe,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, not having enough water, and yes, people knew where I was.
Yeah.
I had contacts even then, but there was a lot of things that I didn't take into account. But it was still an amazing adventure.
So how did you go about acquiring those skills?
Okay, so in the first instance, I started actively seeking something out. So I hopped online, started searching, wanted to do the overnight hiking. I knew kind of what I wanted to do, and the only thing I could find at that time was something called the Adelaide Bushwalkers. And it just so happened that at the time I was searching, they had a new members weekend coming up.
Perfect.
So I signed up very quickly, went along to that, and yeah, they were amazing. I mean, it's a peer group club.
Yes.
So they're not there to nurse you through all the experiences, but the new members weekend was extremely informative. People were very, very willing to share their knowledge and experience. And I've got some long-term friends now that I made through that group. We still walk together.
That's wonderful.
And yeah, so that was really the start of my personal bushwalking journey. And then after doing that for a little while and seeing parts of certainly South Australia that I didn't even know existed, it really gave me the opportunity to explore our own backyard in a way I hadn't thought about. I then got the confidence to put up my hands to help at a school camp. So I've worked in a school, so my other hat is I'm a librarian in a school. When I was quite young still, 28, I put up my hands for school camps and did not get the opportunity. So I kind of lost my confidence. And having gained a little bit of experience with Adelaide Bushwalkers, I thought, this is something I really want to do. We have a really significant school camp every year, a 2-week camp.
Whereabouts is that?
That's in the Grampians.
Oh, lovely.
Amazing experience for our students, usually regarded as one of the highlights of their time at school.
Oh, fantastic.
Whether or not they choose to continue, doing that kind of thing, it's really regarded as a significant point. So I approached what was then our new outdoor ed leader and just sort of said, look, I'd really like the opportunity to come along and help with this. I think I've got a few skills that I could now offer and share. And yeah, it was warmly greeted. They had the funding to train one person that year, and they said, "You're it."
Oh, great!
So yeah, it was a fantastic opportunity. Pushed me well outside of my comfort zone. I thought I'd learned quite a lot. I had a lot more to learn. And they've been super, super supportive in helping build up those skills and giving me those opportunities to use those skills.
Yeah, so it sounds like you, to some extent, the stars aligned for you, didn't they? Because you had the desire and then the opportunity at the school came up. And
I think they did. There's an element of just doing something. I think you have to make that first step
and putting yourself out there,
out of your comfort zone. And I think that's an awful lot about what adventuring in the outdoors is about.
You talked about being out of your comfort zone. So what were some of the aspects of the training that you found challenging?
I think everything about it is challenging for someone that's walking in, especially when you're training with lots of people who may have actually already been working in the industry for some years and are just looking to pass a particular certificate or tick the next box. So coming in again as an older person, I guess I felt like I was a bit of an imposter for a start, that I didn't have any right to be there. But it is an amazing experience. So I worked with Bushwalking Leadership South Australia, and they're the ones that put you through your paces. At the time we were doing it, they had changed the structure of what they were doing as well. So it was new. The course structure was new for everybody, including the trainers. So it was quite intensive. And it started off with a massive online component, which just showed how much knowledge I didn't have.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so that was super intensive, as well as that face-to-face and practical experiences.
So do you get... assessed, I guess, for want of a better word, on the practical and any written component
You do.
as well?
Yes, you do.
It's like going back to uni.
It was. And for someone who's not, we even had an exam.
Oh, how terrifying.
So you start off doing an assistant course first, just to be an assistant leader. And that's a fairly intensive short-term block to get you up to a certain standard. Once you've then passed that component, they then offer you it's up to you then if you choose to then continue to be a fully qualified bushwalking leader, which my school had already told me that's what they wanted me to do. So it was a potentially long-term commitment because people can take years to complete the qualification, partly because a large component of the qualification is a logbook of
that makes
experience
sense.
and walks and demonstrating that you actually have the required skill set to be left solely responsible for a group of participants, whether they're children or adults.
I guess you have to think about how to manage all sorts of scenarios and where
you do
safety, danger.
You do. So there's an awful. There is a lot to do with risk management and risk minimalisation. We talk about a lot about real risk and perceived risk. So often things that look scary are not necessarily as scary as some other things. There's quite a lot of psychology. There's a lot about weather. I had to learn all sorts about meteorology and checking the weather before you go out. So that's actually quite a large component as well.
What about fire risk? I'm sure you must.
Risk, and there's amazing. I mean, you can fill out an entire risk sheet and still think of more, and you'll probably go on the walk and then think of more again. And it's very difficult to predict every scenario. But there are sort of common factors that you would look at, such as, weather is one, your environment that you're actually walking in. So those risks are going to change depending on whether you're walking by bodies of water or on a cliff top or whatever the environment is can affect. The people that you're taking or you might meet on the way, depending on how public your activity is, and then the actual equipment that you might be using. So they're probably the key sort of factors. And those kind of factors, anyone that's had to write a risk assessment for any area, not just outdoor education, has probably had to do similar sort of things.
No matter what your planning is, still things can go wrong, because I think of Turia Pitt, that beautiful girl doing that run out in the outback, and that awful fire that swept through.
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway, let's not dwell on that.
Well, I mean, but our role as a leader is to minimise. We have to look at what is acceptable and what's not. Yeah. And if something's not acceptable, then we shouldn't be doing it. Yeah. So it is looking at that. Yeah.
And so, Tina, what you've gone on to develop from all your bushwalking is a program called Strong Daughters. And this is one of the things I'd really like to focus on today. So can you tell us about Strong Daughters and what is it? Who can go along? Where do you go? All those sorts of things.
Okay. Well, Strong Daughters came about for a number of reasons. Partly, we did have to do these logbooks, and as part of those logbooked walks, we had to walk with adults, we had to walk with children, we had to walk with different types of groups over that period in different conditions. So I was able to tick a lot of those boxes anyway, walking with ABW and walking with school students, and I had a lot of willing friends who were willing to be victims in terms of my walks. But the Strong Daughters program really grew out of a number of people that had said, look, I'd love to do this. Can I bring my daughter? Can I bring my child along? And a lot of the forums that I walked with didn't allow for that sort of scenario. So I was looking at writing something that would suit those sort of groups. And then I myself, I'm a mother of two. I've got a now 15-year-old and a 19-year-old, but my daughter at the time was probably about 11 or 12 when I started walking. So this is before I did the training. She was very keen, not so much on the idea of walking, but being with me and not being left behind, because I was increasingly going away, neglectful mother that I am, going away on these exciting adventures, actually going out. And she was hearing my stories and seeing my enthusiasm, I think, and really wanted to be part of that. So very early on, she wanted to go with me for the weekends, and we did a few practice walks around home where she had to prove to me that she could actually manage. If she wanted to go on the longer trips, then she had to prove to me that she could carry a full pack. And she's a very determined person, at the time, if I call her a young lady, I would certainly get shouted at. But she was a very determined person, and very quickly proved that she was capable. We did overnighter down in Deep Creek and a couple of others, and she wanted to do the overland track with me when I said I was going to do that. So for people that are not aware, the overland track is a fairly significant undertaking in Tasmania. It's something that you have to book on, and we committed to you've got to carry all your own gear. There are huts, but you still have to carry a tent. You still have to carry all your food, all your equipment to cook on, and things like that. So we had to put in a bit of training. First day on the trail, she had a bit of a meltdown as soon as we started walking, because she realised, it was a very quiet meltdown. She held it in, but it was obvious she was very, very grumpy, because she realised she was now committed and couldn't get out of it.
Yes, it's hard work.
It's very hard work. We got up that first hill to that first view, having climbed up using a chain to get up the thing with full packs. She switched it on. We did a little mini podcast of our own, just for our own use, where she recorded her thoughts and feelings, and she really talked about how amazing it was, even though she'd just been glaring at me all the way up the hill. She met other people on the trail. To cut a long story short, there was lots of adventures along the way. It was very intensive. It certainly challenged her, but she also saw us being challenged. There were times where she was coping beautifully and we were struggling. And she got to the end of that trail and went back to school and realised that she had achieved something that most of her peers had never even dreamed of doing. And it gave her a real strong sense of self-worth. I think it really showed her how resilient and capable she was. It became a real part of her identity. And when it came to things like potential school camps, it was something she felt like she was an expert in.
Yeah, she was comfortable.
It gave her a real sense of comfort. So I saw that in her. I saw her sense of independence and self-worth. And I really wanted to share that with other girls in particular, because having worked in a school for many years, I think that this is based on my own experience and what I've read, what I've seen, and what I've experienced over many years working in the education system. There's the real confidence gap with girls. I think young girls are still very confident. I think I spoke to you before this about the Run Like a Girl campaign.
You did.
And I think that's a really amazing, it is an advert for a certain product, but the actual campaign was amazing and just shows how a very young girl is still bursting with confidence. If you tell her to do something, she'll do it with full passion and enthusiasm and determination. Then at some point at that sort of 11, 12, 13-year-old bracket, as puberty kind of kicks in and hits, they lose that confidence. They take a back step to other things. They don't tend to speak up or put their hand up in class or do as many of those things that they would have done. And I wanted to give them a way of kind of arming themselves, preparing them, giving them a toolkit of personal skills that would allow them to recognise that they were capable, that they were resilient.
And so in terms of the strong daughters, so what age group does that target?
I'm targeting tweens. I mean, that was my mindset. So I often get requests, and we have done camps for younger girls, and we've had requests for older girls, and we've had requests for boys, and all of those things are possible.
Yes.
But the foundation of what I was trying to do was aimed at that tween age group with that very specific purpose.
And you've made it so Strong Daughters, it's a mother-daughter or grandmother-daughter combination, isn't it? So it's not just the girls. So
that's right.
Why do you think it's important to have the mother and daughter along together?
Well, first of all, I think when I was thinking of the phrase Strong Daughters, I wasn't strictly thinking of necessarily just that mother-daughter relationship. I was thinking of daughters as in, I guess, daughters of us all,
yes.
in a much more global sense, you know, we're all responsible. And I've had grandmothers bring their daughters. I even had a grandfather who asked me for his daughter to participate with his granddaughter, and she couldn't do the 2 days, so she did 1 day because he wanted her to be part of it. And then he came with her and walked that second day.
Oh, lovely.
This was in my original pilot group. But yes, you're right. It has grown into something that is about that significant relationship, whatever that relationship is, whether it's mother and grandmother. I think it is very powerful for mothers to see what their daughters are capable of. And I think it's to see your daughter perhaps move beyond what your comfort zone is.
Yeah.
So to let them step out ahead and to let them be capable individuals is actually really hard for some mothers. And one of the very first things I actually do is we almost split the group into mothers and daughters so that the daughters take control, apparently. They take control and lead the rest of us, so the mothers step back and allow the girls to do that under sort of, managed conditions. But the idea is to give the daughters that chance of feeling like they're in charge and in control and managing themselves.
And I imagine for some daughters, they may not experience that very much in their day-to-day lives.
No, that's right. And we have had participants that may have been subjected to bullying. They may have been through family issues at home. There's all number of reasons why confidence can be lost, as well as just that general normal loss of confidence.
Yeah.
And I think for them, it's a really nice opportunity. And you are throwing together a group of girls who don't know each other. And I actually think that's quite important. I think it's quite nice that they don't know each other. Because there's a certain confidence in sharing an experience where you don't feel judged by your peers.
Yeah, of course.
So I think they've all been thrown in a similar scenario. And my daughter's actually been a really important part of this program as well. So she's acted as a mentor because I have that relationship with her. I know I can trust her to listen and help monitor things. So she has a radio and I have a radio, and the two of us communicate. And I think that mentoring is quite important because she really role models some of the expectations in terms of stopping and listening. But she also acts as a bit of what's the word? An impetus.
A catalyst.
Catalyst. Yes, to aid that communication and to make sure that no one's actually feeling left out. And I think for the adults as well, you've got that opportunity to bond in a different way. To perhaps share some stories, build some connections.
And so what do you think it is about being out bushwalking? Do you think it's being in nature? Do you think it's a challenging aspect of it? What is it that kind of brings out that confidence in the girls? I
think there's a lot of front-loading in these activities. So building on the experience I've had in schools, a well-written program is not just about taking kids out and having fun. It's not just about making them do something hard for the sake of doing something hard. It's not just about making them jump off a cliff, kayak. It's their activities, but it's the psychological, social aspects of the activities that are really, really important. So the challenge of being out of your comfort zone, and for some of these girls, they might have never done anything like this before. They're used to being behind a device in a room, playing games, reading, going to the cinema with their friends, going shopping. The idea of roughing it,
Yeah.
being a bit dirty, being a bit messy, and not having someone to pick up everything for you, and having to be independent is a really, really important aspect. So when I talk about front loading, the very first thing we do when we all sit down as a group is talk about what an adventure looks like. And I ask them who they think an adventurer is. So
what do they say? That's interesting.
well, I guess, first of all, you're often looking at male role models very often, and they're the super fit, super young, sporty, people that climb Everest, people that, ride across deserts on camels, whatever it is. But they're, there's the fairly stereotyped images of what someone might look like. And obviously by the end of the 2 days, I'm hoping they recognise that an adventurer really is anyone that's prepared to step outside of their comfort zone. For some people, walking out their front door might be an adventure, if it's something that they find really, really challenging and hard to do. But the point is learning that they are capable of making a change.
And so that obviously has a connection to their mental well-being.
Yes.
Yeah. And so have you found, just observing the mothers and daughters, that there has been a change in terms of their perceptions of themselves and their resilience? And have you seen that?
I think definitely at the end, we always have a debrief. Obviously, we're not going to see the full impact in one weekend.
No, you can't.
It's not going to be possible, but we do get really lovely feedback sometimes. And for instance, from my very original Strong Daughters, was a young lady who's now chosen to do outdoor education as her year 10 topic at school. This was a girl that was shrieking at slugs outside her tent on the night and could barely live without her mobile phone, had never seen a waterfall before. So she's gone from that. And that was amazing to hear because it obviously had significance for her. As I said before, it's not about turning these girls into outdoor ed people. It's about giving them a toolkit that they can work with, that they are resilient, that they can fail and try again or try something different, and that they know that they are capable people.
And one of the things you mentioned to me when we chatted before this podcast was the flip side, the daughters watching their mothers. Perhaps the mothers are vulnerable or struggling a bit. And so what are some examples of that, and what kind of impact does that have on the relationship?
Okay. So I think this is probably a crucial part of what I try to do. We try to build in a distinct challenge, and I separate the mothers and daughters and talk to both groups. And I talk to the girls very much about how it's their responsibility to help their mums cope, because the next bit is a bit that adults find really hard, because we basically have a sort of a rock scramble down carrying the packs. So we talk to the girls about how they're going to help their mums manage that and getting the packs down, and that they're going to need to lead this part because they'll find it easy. Is what I'm telling the girls.
Poor old mums
and
with
the poor
sore
old mums
knees
are going to find it hard. So I then have to talk to the mums, because some of them are actually very capable ladies, and some genuinely do find it quite challenging because you're going downhill down a slope, and it's a very managed scenario. But that can be scary if it's out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that we talk to the mums and say, look, you might find this hard, and that's okay. And I usually say to them, look, it's okay to let the girls see you struggle. Please allow them to help you. Even if you're not struggling, please allow the girls to help you, because that's really important. I said, if you are finding it hard and you want to have a cry, please, that's okay. But what's really important is the girls see you struggle and persevere. And I think it's that role modelling of seeing an older female role model struggling with something, finding it hard, but still having that determination to get through the challenge. And I think it gives them such a strong basis for some communication. I think that's where the relationship value is in that mother-daughter experience. They both get to see a different aspect, because I think as women we're often having to put on this strong front.
Oh, all the time.
That's right. And I think it's okay to let our girls see a struggle, but still.
Yeah, I know. I think in our day-to-day lives, certainly as a mother, juggling, career, family, children, you you almost can't afford to let yourself sort of slide into any sort of feelings of vulnerability. You soldier on essentially,
Yes.
don't you? And that's what the children normally see. So it must be almost a bit of a shock for them to see their mothers in a position where they are challenged. But as you say, it's great role modelling because they're determined, they push through it and come out the other side.
It's absolutely. And I think for the girls as well, it's an opportunity, as I say. The reverse side is the mums get to see how capable the girls are. They allow those girls to be capable. And those girls, as part of that growing up process, start to begin to realise where their strengths are and to actually give something back to their family or to their caregiver. I think is really significant. Tweens are actually easier than younger girls in many ways for this bit because they're beginning to have that understanding, but to say thank you to their parents for what they do, to recognise that effort, to actually see, and that's kind of really important. I think it's
because young children are quite egocentric,
yes,
aren't
that's
they?
right.
And they're sort of by the tween stage, they're coming out of that a bit, and they're more aware of others around them, and particularly their parents who do a lot for them. The other thing that just strikes me as we're talking is not only have the mothers and daughters seen each other through this experience, but then they've got a shared memory.
Absolutely. And this is where we don't necessarily see that impact. So a lot of the lovely feedback that we've had has actually come after the mothers and daughters have had those conversations in the car on the way home. Because they've debriefed possibly in a way they wouldn't have done in front of us. And they've shared that experience, and it's given them something really special.
And with both hats on, as a librarian and a bushwalking leader, what do you think about the benefit of being away from Wi-Fi and social media too? I mean, that must be part of what encourages the social connection on your bushwalks. Is that something?
Yes, I think we do request that mobile phones, and I think this is super hard for the adults more than the children sometimes. We do request that they put things into aeroplane mode, as if nothing else, because that stops it spoiling everyone else's experiences. Because even if you're not on your device, having someone else on the phone or looking at social media is breaking that connection.
Yes.
And for people to actually talk to each other, they need to be out of the way. Yes, working in a school, devices are very much a large part of everyday life. They're part of homework. It's actually really hard to find that downtime. And as working in an office type scenario where I'm looking at a screen and a computer, it is physically draining.
Yeah, I agree.
It is. I go home and my eyes are burning. I'm unusually tired, having not really done very much physically during the day. And I know I can go away on a 2-week camp, where I'm on the go from 6 a.m. till 10:30 at night. And it's absolutely full on the whole time, but I feel alive. And it's a very different feeling. I'm not saying that's for everyone. It's hard work, but it's a different kind of hard work.
Yes.
I think...
Well, it's a very engaged sort of hard work, isn't it?
It is.
Because you are responsible for other people, you have to keep your mind on the job, obviously. So you're very focused.
But you're connecting with people all the time around you. It's whether it's adult to child, peer to peer, adult to adult. It's just being aware enough to have that time for those connections.
Yes.
And not walking past with your head down on your phone.
On your phone, yeah. And then I've mentioned on so many of my podcasts that nature comes up again and again as a really strong informer of well-being. Being out in nature just has so many benefits for your mental and physical health. And that's starting to be proven scientifically, even though most of us kind of know that instinctively. So what are your thoughts about being in nature?
I think nature refreshes. as I said before, it's very draining. And most of our day-to-day lives, especially sitting in front of technology, can be very draining. And some of those relationships that we have in our everyday lives can be very stressful. They're not necessarily all nurturing. And I think we're constantly under these kind of personal energy drains, for want of another way of phrasing it. I think giving ourselves time in nature is a way to refresh, reset, press those buttons and start again. I think, again, it comes down to that connection, this time not necessarily with people, but with our environment and where we actually are in our place in the world. Yeah. When we take young people out, very often when they get out there, it's about doing the activity, getting from A to B. They are less concerned with where they are than just getting to the finish of it. Mm-hmm. So you almost have to actively engage them in the journey, and it's trying to teach them to slow down sometimes and connect with the big and the small. You can do that. I think sometimes taking photographs is a really way to do that, because it's getting them to focus on perhaps something quite small, or finding a scene that they can really inspire awe with. I think teaching them connection and respect for their environment is really, really important. Yes. That we have a responsibility, and that really comes through at the end of our debriefing, because we do actively try to teach this, and that does come back as feedback quite regularly. Young people are very passionate about their environment. We've got Greta Thunberg now that's making huge waves and just showing how powerful a young woman can be. Yeah. But I think the girls we take out really get that. And helping them to appreciate the amazingness of this environment is, giving them that opportunity to see it, to breathe it, to hear it, to touch it, is super important. And one thing that we do with our women and our girls is try to take some time out. And it might be a minute of silence where you just listen to what you can hear, not talking to each other, spreading out and having that space to connect with where you are. And it's an incredibly powerful thing.
It is, and we don't do it often in our lives, do we? No, most people don't. So can you tell us about perhaps one or two of your most memorable strong daughter moments?
Oh gosh, that's
you don't have
that's
to
probably the hardest. That's the hardest bit. I think as an overall thing, I find it very powerful. Okay, in terms of memorable strong daughter moments, I get a kick every time out of that descent I was talking about before, and seeing the girls help their mums up or down that slope, depending which way we go. I think that's incredibly rewarding to see how the girls, having really not known each other very long, work together to face that challenge and work as a team and with their parents as well. I just think that's an incredibly powerful thing to watch and be part of. My role is running up and down and making sure they do the whole thing very safely and that it's managed. But they really, they will talk later about how that's probably the highlight for them, that challenge aspect.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that one of the hardest aspects actually turns out to be the highlight.
I think the hardest bit for the girls is the long stretch where there's not so much action and they've just got to keep walking. And that's quite exhausting towards the end of their trip. But the challenge bit is what makes the trip, and I get a lot out of that. I think memorable was the girls walking down one particular part of the trail and coming face to face with a older couple walking in the opposite direction, and a man who kind of looked at the whole group of girls. They were walking ahead of us. The mothers, we were further back, but within earshot. And this man turned to the girls and looked at them all and sort of said, "Oh, where are the boys to keep you all in line?" And our mouths fell open at the back, and it was one of those conversations we were then able to have with the girls. How on earth did that make you feel? Yes. What did you say? How did you handle that? Because I think it is quite shocking really now.
Well, just
to
that
even think about
that kind of assumption that they couldn't be capable
That's
by themselves.
Right. And very much the girls, well, we don't need anyone. We're doing quite well. Thank you very much on our own. And so, I think that's why we need programs like this.
Yeah, of course. So, Tina, another aspect of group travel is connection with others. So, in your opinion, how does group travel, and particularly bushwalking, promote connection?
I think every time we walk down the high street, we go to work, we drop the kids at school and so on, most of us are very self-conscious about how we appear to others. I think we are quite judgmental of ourselves and of other people, and we feel judged. We're very influenced by labels, the lawyer, the psychiatrist, the architect, the teacher, the waitress, the cleaner. And I think being out bush in particular is a great equalizer, particularly on those kind of adventures where you're having to be self-sufficient and struggle. Those kind of experiences, when we meet with a group who are ready for a challenge and a new adventure, we tend to leave those labels behind. We're all there with a common and connecting interest. So we all get uncomfortable, we all get tired, we all get wet, we all get grungy. And I really think that breaks down a lot of barriers. Our needs become a lot more basic. We become more concerned with things like warmth, food, shelter, water. And we leave the makeup and the fashion concerns behind. I'm often really quite surprised when I see Facebook photos of people that I've walked with, and I realise just how amazingly professional and, there's a totally different persona and image. And yet I met them in a totally different capacity. I might have been really scared to talk to that person on the Facebook page. Yes, if you'd
seen them that way.
And knew what they did. Whereas out when we're all just doing that common thing, it's a really humbling experience. I think it's you get to know the stories of individuals. You get to know the person, not the label
behind the facade.
That's right. And people are very willing to share kindness and knowledge, I think.
So the final question that I like to ask all of my guests is, if you could recommend 2 things that all people could do to improve their well-being, what would they be?
Probably more life attitudes that I'd recommend than anything, which I do think affect your well-being. And I think one is be brave. And by that, I don't mean be reckless or fearless. I don't mean jumping out of a plane or dangling off a rope. I just mean challenge yourself from where you are at. And as I said, everyone's adventures are going to look very different. I'm not going to be the Instagram model on the top of Everest, but I do what I can. I just mean, I think, as I mentioned to you once before, I was really, really inspired to listen to a lady who was struggling with obesity, who desperately was depressed and wanted to make a change. And her change was to walk up and down her hallway. It was a radio podcast that I listened to a while ago, and I found her inspiring. She chose to do something rather than nothing, even though it was hard for her. And I think we shouldn't judge other people's adventures, which brings me to my next bit of recommendation is be kind, not only to others but to yourself.
Wonderful recommendation.
Being able to be compassionate to others and being able to show yourself self-compassion in terms of picking yourself up, being kind to yourself if you do fail, and helping yourself in terms of moving on, treating yourself as you would a best friend. I think we're our own worst critics.
I totally agree.
So yes, be brave, be kind.
Be brave and be kind. Well, they're beautiful words. Thank you very much, Tina.
That's okay. Thank you very much.
And that was Tina Jameson, founder of the Strong Daughters program. Strong Daughters is offered through the Big Heart Adventure website. I interviewed Lisa Murphy, founder of Big Heart Adventures, in episode 19, and I'll put links in the show notes. And I do apologise for my croaky voice. Between recording with Tina and doing this outro, I've managed to get quite a nasty cold. Anyway, you can subscribe to Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, and while you're there, click on the bell to be alerted when new episodes are available. You can also subscribe on your favourite podcast app. iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. And you can follow the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Direct links to all social media can be found on the subscribe page of my website at www.amandaswellbeingpodcast.com. If you would like to contact me, you can send me a message via the contacts page on my website. Please feel free to suggest topics you'd like to learn more about and people you'd like to hear interviewed, and I'll do my best to deliver that to you. Producing the podcast is a labour of love. We put in a lot of time, effort, and money behind the scenes. So if you enjoy Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast and would like to make a contribution via Patreon, PayPal, or by Amazon to help ensure that we continue to provide you with excellent content, please visit the contribute page on my website. Finally, please take a minute to leave a rating on iTunes. It improves visibility and will help me source excellent guests. I apologise again for my voice, and thank you very much for tuning in. Eat well, move well, think well.